Ambassador walked back and forth across the smooth crystal floor of the diplomatic station. Her green scales caught the light from the artificial stars above. She had been doing this for hours now, unable to sit still. Her hands, covered in small protective scales, were closed tight with anger and worry. The marriage was going to happen in just 7 days. Princess of the Empire would marry Prince of the Dominion. Everyone said it was a good thing. The two biggest powers in the galaxy would join together. There would be peace, they said. There would be order. Knew better, she had seen what happened when they took over worlds. They did not bring peace. They brought fear and death. The belief that only the strong should live. They thought other species were weak and worthless. Once Prince was married to Princess, the Empire would change. It would become like the Dominion. The ambassador stopped walking and looked out through the large window. Space stretched out in all directions, filled with tiny lights that were actually stars. Each light might have worlds around it. Each world might have people living on it. People like her own kind, They were not strong fighters like They were not powerful like They were just trying to live their lives in peace. "You are worried again," said a voice behind her. Turned around to see her assistant. He was young for only about 60 years old. His scales were still bright blue instead of the darker green that came with age. "I am always worried these days," replied. She walked to the window again and put her hand on the cool surface. "In 7 days, everything will change. The galaxy will belong to the way of thinking." Moved to stand beside her. "Maybe it will not be so bad. Princess is known to be kind. She might change Prince." Made a sound that was like laughing but not happy. "You have never met Prince." "I have. He is tall and strong with gray skin like metal and eyes like black holes. He enjoys causing pain. He thinks kindness is weakness. Princess might be gentle now, but she will learn to be like him, or she will be crushed by him." The princess was famous across the galaxy for her beauty and her strange gift. All could feel the emotions of other people, but Princess was special. She could look into someone's mind and understand everything about them. She could feel what they felt, know what they thought. It made her very wise, but also very sad. She felt the pain of everyone around her. "Have you spoken to the princess?" asked. "I have tried. 3 times I have asked to meet with her. 3 times I was told she was too busy. The wedding plans are more important than the words of one small ambassador from one small world." Remembered her last attempt. She had waited outside the princess's rooms for 6 hours. Finally, a guard had come out. He was tall and thin, with skin that glowed softly like moonlight. All looked like this, as if they were made of starlight instead of flesh. "The princess cannot see you today," the guard had said. "She is choosing flowers for the ceremony." Flowers? While the future of 1,000,000,000 worlds hung in the balance, the princess was choosing flowers. But knew it was not really the princess's fault. Princess was only following the path that had been chosen for her since birth. Royalty did not marry for love. They married for duty. They married to make their empire stronger. The problem was that this marriage would not just make the empire stronger, it would make it cruel. The Dominion had rules about which species were allowed to live and which should be destroyed. They had lists of worlds that should be taken over and worlds that should be wiped clean. Once the two empires joined, those lists would become real actions. "There must be something we can do," said. "Some way to stop this." "I have tried everything," answered. "I have spoken to every ambassador who would listen. I have sent messages to every leader who might care. Most of them just laugh. They think I am being silly. They say the marriage is good for everyone." The truth was that most of the big powers were happy about the marriage. They thought it would bring stability. They did not care about what happened to smaller worlds like Zephyr Prime. The Council of Four was excited because it meant less war between the big empires. The Trade Federation was happy because it meant safer shipping routes. The Academic Union thought it would lead to more shared knowledge. None of them were thinking about what it would mean for species that could not defend themselves. Had read the reports from space. Worlds full of peaceful people had been turned into training grounds for soldiers. Entire species had been forced to work in mines until they died. Children were taken from their families and taught to fight instead of learning about art or science or love. "Maybe after the marriage, things will not change right away," said. He was trying to make her feel better, but his voice showed that he did not really believe his own words. "You did not see Prince when he visited the station last month," said. "He walked through the halls like he already owned everything. He looked at the other ambassadors like they were insects. When the small delegation from Seven tried to speak with him, he just walked past them. He did not even pretend to care." The worst part was what had happened during the formal dinner. Prince had been asked about his plans for the future. He had smiled, showing teeth that were sharp like a predator's. He had talked about bringing order to the galaxy. He had used words like necessary sacrifice and natural selection and survival of the fittest. Everyone had nodded and agreed. They had raised their glasses and toasted to the future, but had seen what he really meant. She had understood the threat hidden in his polite words. The marriage would happen in 7 days. After that, the galaxy would be a much more dangerous place for anyone who was not strong enough to fight back. Closed her eyes and tried to think of some other plan, some other way to stop what was coming. But she had already tried everything she could think of. She was just one small voice crying out against the storm that was coming. In 7 days, everything would change. The alarm that echoed through the diplomatic station was not loud, but it made everyone stop what they were doing. Ambassador looked up from her morning meal of sweet algae and mineral water. The tone meant that a new ship had arrived. That was strange. All the important guests for the wedding were already here. She walked to the main viewing deck where many other ambassadors were gathering. Through the large windows, she could see a small ship moving slowly toward the docking bay. It was not like the other ships at the station. The vessels were smooth and curved, made of materials that shined like pearls. The ships were dark and angular, built like weapons that could fly. This new ship looked different. It was smaller than most diplomatic ships and older. Parts of its hull showed marks from space battles. There were patches where repairs had been made with whatever materials the crew could find. The ship moved carefully, like someone walking through a dangerous place. "What kind of ship is that?" asked Ambassador from the Centaur Collective. His horse-like body shifted nervously as he spoke. "I have never seen anything like it," replied Ambassador Vex of the Silicon Quartz. Her rock-like form made clicking sounds when she was curious. Studied the ship more carefully. Something about its design seemed familiar, but she could not remember where she had seen anything like it. Then the ship turned, and she saw markings on its side. Symbols that were simple but somehow powerful. "Those are human markings," said a quiet voice behind them. Everyone turned to look. The speaker was Ambassador of the Archive Worlds. His people were known for remembering everything that had ever happened in the galaxy. "Human?" asked. "But humans have not been seen in this part of space for many years." "Decades," corrected. "The last official contact was 47 years ago. They said they were going to explore the outer rim. Most people assumed they had died out there." Remembered now. She had been very young when the humans last visited Zephyr Prime. They had been strange visitors, not like other species who wanted to trade or make alliances. The humans had just wanted to learn. They asked questions about everything. They were fascinated by art and stories and the small details of daily life. Her grandfather had told her about them. He said they were weak compared to other species, but they had something different in their eyes. Hope, he had called it. They always seemed to believe that things could get better, even when everything looked bad. The docking bay doors opened, and the human ship disappeared inside. An hour later, word came that the humans wanted to speak with the diplomatic council. They said they had important information about threats to the galaxy. Princess was in her private chambers when she heard about the humans. She was sitting by a window, watching the stars and trying not to think about her wedding in 6 days. Her long silver hair fell around her shoulders like liquid starlight. Her skin glowed softly with the inner light that all had. Her mind was always filled with the emotions of others. Right now, she could feel the excitement and curiosity of the ambassadors on the station. She could sense Prince's anger at being interrupted by unexpected visitors. She could feel her father's impatience as he dealt with the new arrivals. But underneath all of that, she felt something else. A kind of consciousness that was different from anything she had experienced before. It was like trying to look at the sun through thick clouds. She could sense that someone was there, but she could not see them clearly. "Your Highness," said her servant Myra, "the human delegation has requested a formal meeting with you." "Humans?" Princess stood up, interested despite herself. "I have read about them in the old records. They are supposed to be quite primitive. Would you like me to arrange the meeting?" The princess thought about it. She was supposed to be resting before her wedding. She was supposed to be thinking about her future with Prince. But this strange new feeling in her mind made her curious. "Yes," she said, "bring them to the Blue Chamber in 1 hour." When the humans arrived, Princess was surprised by how normal they looked. She had expected them to be more alien. Instead, they looked almost like young, except their skin did not glow and their hair was darker. There were 3 humans in the delegation, 2 men and 1 woman. The woman was clearly their leader. She was not tall, but she carried herself like someone who had faced many dangers. Her hair was black with streaks of gray, and her brown eyes looked tired but determined. "Your Highness," the woman said, bowing in the way that humans had learned from other species. "I am Captain Sarah of the Earth vessel Wandering Star. Thank you for agreeing to see us." Princess tried to read the captain's emotions the way she always did with new people. She expected to feel the usual mixture of nervousness, hope, and hidden intentions that most beings carried when they met her. Instead, she felt something that confused her completely. Captain's mind was like looking into a fire. Princess could sense strong emotions, determination, worry, sadness, and something that felt like protective anger. But underneath all of that was something she had never encountered before. It was like a wall made of pure will, holding back thoughts and feelings that the human did not want to share. For the first time in her long life, Princess could not fully understand the person standing in front of her. "Captain," the princess said, trying to hide her surprise, "it has been many years since humans visited this part of space. What brings you to our diplomatic station?" "We bring word of a threat that affects all species, Your Highness," Captain replied. "Something is moving through the outer rim, destroying entire star systems. We barely escaped with our lives, but we managed to gather information that every government needs to hear." The princess studied the captain's face. Most people became nervous when talking to her. They knew she could read their thoughts, and it made them uncomfortable. But Captain seemed calm, even though Princess could sense the terrible memories hidden behind that calmness. "You have seen this threat yourself?" the princess asked. "We were at the research station when it happened," Captain said. Her voice stayed steady, but Princess felt a flash of pain and loss from the human's mind. One moment the station was there. The next moment it was gone, not destroyed, gone, as if it had never existed. One of the other humans, a young man with worried eyes, stepped forward. "We lost good people there, Your Highness. Scientists who were trying to help everyone, not just humans." Princess felt something strange happen in her mind. Usually, when she listened to people tell sad stories, she felt their pain as if it was her own. It was part of her gift and her curse. She felt everything that others felt. But with these humans, it was different. She could feel their sadness and loss, but she could also feel something else. They were not broken by what had happened to them. They were angry, yes, and hurt, but they had not given up hope. They still believed they could do something to help. "What kind of threat are we facing?" the princess asked. Captain looked directly into her eyes. "We do not know, Your Highness, but we know it is coming this way, and we know that no single species or empire can face it alone. That is why we came here, despite the risks. The marriage between your empire and the Dominion will create the largest military force in the galaxy. But if that force is used for conquest instead of protection, we will all fall separately." Princess tried again to read deeper into the captain's thoughts, but the wall of will was still there. She could sense that Captain was telling the truth, but she could not see all of the truth. It was frustrating and fascinating at the same time. "You risk much by coming here," the princess observed. "Your ship barely survived the journey. You could have sent a message instead." "Messages can be ignored," Captain said. "People needed to see us, to know that we are not just stories from the past. We are still here, still fighting, still hopping for something better." The word hopping hit Princess like a physical force. In all her years of reading minds and hearts, she had rarely found real hope. Most people hoped for small things: safety, comfort, success. But this human hoped for something much larger. She hoped for a future where all species could work together. It was a foolish hope, Princess thought. The galaxy was too big, too complicated, too full of different needs and desires. But as she looked into Captain's tired eyes, she found herself wondering if maybe, just maybe, foolish hope was exactly what the galaxy needed right now. Princess could not sleep. For 2 days since meeting the humans, she had been thinking about Captain and the strange wall in her mind. The princess had always been able to understand everyone around her. Their thoughts and feelings flowed into her consciousness like water flowing into a pool. But the human Captain was different. She walked through the quiet halls of her private quarters, her bare feet silent on the cool metal floor. Outside her windows, the stars looked the same as always, but somehow everything felt different now. The princess had requested 3 more meetings with the human delegation. Each time, she learned something new that confused her even more. Captain talked about things that no other species discussed. She spoke of choice as if it was the most important thing in the universe. She talked about free will as if it was something everyone should have. These ideas were strange to Princess. In the Empire, everyone had their place and their duty. Soldiers fought, workers built, leaders ruled, and royalty married whoever would make the empire stronger. That was how it had always been. That was how it was supposed to be. But Captain came from a world where people could choose their own paths. During their second meeting, the princess had asked about human society. Captain had smiled, and for a moment the wall in her mind had seemed thinner. "On Earth, we believe that every person has the right to decide their own future," the captain had said. "It does not always work out well. People make bad choices sometimes. But we think the right to choose is more important than always making the perfect choice." "But how do you maintain order?" the princess had asked. "How do you keep people from choosing things that hurt others?" "We try to teach them why good choices matter," Captain had replied. "We show them that their choices affect not just themselves, but everyone around them. Most people, when they understand the consequences, will choose to help rather than hurt." Princess had felt something strange when the captain spoke those words. It was like a small light turning on in a dark room. She had never thought that people could be trusted to make good choices on their own. Now, walking through her chambers at night, she kept thinking about that conversation. She thought about her upcoming marriage to Prince. No one had asked her if she wanted to marry him. No one had asked if she thought it was a good idea. It had been decided by others that this marriage would strengthen the empire, and her personal feelings did not matter. For the first time in her life, Princess wondered what she would choose if the choice was really hers to make. The next morning, she requested another meeting with Captain. This time, she asked to speak with the captain alone. Her advisors protested, but the princess insisted. They met in the princess's private garden, a beautiful space filled with flowers from a dozen different worlds. Captain looked tired. Her ship had been damaged during their escape from the outer rim, and her crew was working day and night to repair it. "Captain," the princess said as they walked among the flowering trees, "may I ask you something personal?" "Of course, Your Highness." "When you were young, did you always know that you would be a starship captain?" Captain laughed, a sound that was both sad and happy at the same time. "No, when I was young, I wanted to be a teacher. I thought I would spend my life helping children learn about the universe." "What changed your mind?" "The universe changed," Captain said. "When I was 25, my home colony was attacked by raiders. They killed many people, including my younger brother. I realized that teaching children about the stars was not enough if there was no one to protect them while they learned." Princess felt a wave of old pain from the captain's mind. But she also felt something else, a strength that had grown from that pain instead of being broken by it. "So you chose to become a soldier." "I chose to become a protector," Captain corrected. "There is a difference. A soldier fights for victory. A protector fights so that others do not have to fight at all." They walked in silence for a while. Princess tried to imagine what it would be like to choose her own path based on what she thought was right, instead of what others expected of her. "Captain," she said finally, "tell me about Earth." Captain's eyes grew distant. "Earth was dying when I was born. The oceans were rising, the air was getting too hot, and millions of people were hungry. Everyone said it was too late to save it." "But you did save it." "We tried to. Some of us succeeded in small ways. We built floating cities when the land flooded. We learned to grow food in the desert. We found new ways to clean the air and water." The captain paused to touch one of the alien flowers. "But mostly, we learned to hope for something better, even when everything looked hopeless." "Why?" Princess asked. "Why keep hopping when everything was getting worse?" Captain looked at her with those tired, determined eyes. "Because hope is not about believing that everything will work out perfectly. Hope is about believing that your actions matter, that if you keep trying, you might make things a little bit better than they were before." Princess felt something shift inside her mind, like a door opening that had been locked for her entire life. She had always thought that her duty was to accept whatever fate others chose for her. But what if her duty was actually to choose the fate that would help the most people? "Your Highness," Captain said carefully, "may I ask you something personal?" "Yes." "Do you want to marry Prince?" The question hit Princess like a physical blow. No one had ever asked her that before. Everyone simply assumed that she would do her duty, regardless of her personal feelings. She tried to give the proper answer that personal desires did not matter when the good of the empire was at stake. But when she opened her mouth, different words came out. "No," she whispered, "I do not want to marry him." "Why not?" Princess thought about Prince's mind, which she had read many times during their formal meetings. It was cold and hungry, like a machine built for destroying things. He saw other beings as tools to be used or obstacles to be removed. The idea of spending her life connected to that kind of consciousness made her feel sick. "Because he will hurt people," she said. "Many people. If our empires join under his influence, billions of beings will suffer." "Then why are you going to marry him?" The simple question made Princess realize how little she had actually thought about her choice. She had been told that the marriage was her duty, and she had accepted that. But what if duty meant something different than she had been taught? Because I thought I had no choice." Captain smiled sadly. "Your Highness, you always have a choice. Sometimes all the choices are bad, and you have to pick the least bad one. Sometimes you have to choose between what others want you to do and what you think is right. But you always have a choice." That afternoon, Ambassador was walking through the station's main corridor when she saw something that made her stop in surprise. Princess was sitting in the public observation lounge, talking quietly with Captain. They had been there for hours, discussing something that seemed very serious. What surprised was not that the princess was talking to the human captain. What surprised her was how the princess looked. For months, Princess had seemed like a beautiful statue, perfect, remote, and somehow lifeless. Now she looked alive. Her eyes were bright with interest. Her hands moved as she spoke. She looked like someone who had just discovered that she had something important to say. Moved closer, trying to hear what they were discussing. On Earth, Captain was saying, we have a saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. But what if the good person is not strong enough to stop the evil? Princess asked. Then the good person finds other good people and asks for help, Captain replied. That is what we humans learned during our worst times. Alone, each of us is small and weak, but together we can do things that seem impossible. Princess was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Captain, if you were in my position, what would you do? I would ask myself what choice would help the most people live in peace, Captain said. And then I would find the courage to make that choice, even if it was difficult. Felt a flutter of hope in her chest. For the first time since the marriage was announced, she wondered if maybe, somehow, things could still change. The wedding was only 3 days away. Princess stood in front of the large display screen in the human ship's communication room. Captain had agreed to show her the data they had collected about the threat from the outer rim. What she saw made her blood run cold. The screen showed a map of the galaxy with bright dots marking known star systems. As the display moved forward in time, dots at the edge began disappearing. Not dimming, not changing color, but simply vanishing as if they had never existed. This is from 6 months ago, Captain said, pointing to a cluster of missing dots. The system, 4 inhabited worlds, 2 research stations, and over 50 million beings, gone in less than an hour. What happened to them? Princess asked. We do not know. Our sensors showed the planets were there one moment, and the next moment there was only empty space. No debris, no radiation, no trace that anything had ever been there. Captain touched a control and the display continued moving forward in time. More dots disappeared, dozens of them, hundreds of millions of lives simply erased. This is what we escaped from, said Commander Torres, the younger human who had spoken during their first meeting. His hands shook slightly as he worked the controls. We were at a research station when it happened. We had maybe 5 minutes warning before we had to jump to hyperspace. Princess studied the pattern of disappearing systems. The threat was moving inward toward the galaxy's center, consuming everything in its path. At the current rate, it would reach the major civilizations within a few years. How many people know about this? She asked. We have tried to warn everyone, Captain replied. But most governments think we are lying or mistaken. They say humans are too primitive to understand what we really saw. They think we are trying to trick them into giving us technology or protection. The princess felt a surge of anger. She could sense the truth in Captain's mind, buried beneath layers of frustration and grief. The humans had risked everything to warn the galaxy about this threat, and no one was listening to them. The Dominion refuses to see us at all, Commander Torres added. Prince's advisors said that humans should focus on begging for protection instead of spreading panic with false stories. Princess closed her eyes and reached out with her empathic abilities. She could feel Prince in his quarters several levels below. His mind was focused on the upcoming wedding, but not with joy or love. He was thinking about how the marriage would give him access to technology and resources. He was making plans for conquests that would begin as soon as the ceremony was over. She could also feel her father, Emperor, in his private office. He was reviewing military reports and thinking about how the alliance with the would help expand influence. Neither of them was considering the possibility that there might be threats more dangerous than their political rivals. Captain, Princess said slowly, what would it take to fight this threat? We do not know enough about it to be sure, Captain replied. But based on what we have seen, no single empire would be strong enough. It would take cooperation between many species, sharing technology and resources and knowledge. The kind of cooperation that the marriage will prevent, the princess said. Captain nodded sadly. Once your empire and the Dominion are joined, they will be too powerful for other species to challenge, but they will also be focused inward, on controlling their territory and expanding their influence. They will not work with smaller civilizations as equals. Princess thought about her conversations with Prince. He had made it clear that he saw other species as either subjects to be controlled or enemies to be destroyed. The idea of working with them as partners was completely foreign to him. There would be no united defense against this threat, she realized. Each species would face it alone, and each would fall alone. That is what we fear, Your Highness. The princess spent the rest of that day thinking about what she had learned. That evening, she did something she had never done before. She sent a private message to Ambassador, asking them to meet with her in secret. They met in the station's botanical garden at midnight, when most beings were sleeping. Ambassador looked nervous as she approached. She had never spoken privately with Princess before. Your Highness, said, bowing deeply, you honor me with this meeting. Please just call me, the princess said, and sit with me. I need to speak with someone who understands what is really at stake here. Sat on the bench beside the princess, still looking confused. I am not sure what you mean, Your Highness. You have been opposing my marriage to Prince for months, said. You know that it will lead to suffering for smaller species like your own. You have tried to warn people about what will happen. Yes, admitted carefully, but no one has listened. I am listening now. Princess told about her conversations with Captain. She explained about the threat from the outer rim and what it would mean if the galaxy's civilizations could not work together. She described her growing understanding of what Prince really wanted from their marriage. I have spent my whole life believing that my duty was to accept whatever fate others chose for me, the princess said. But the humans have shown me something different. They have shown me that sometimes duty means making the hard choice to do what is right, even when it goes against what others expect. Listened in amazement. This was not the same remote, resigned princess she had seen for months. This was someone who had discovered her own voice and was ready to use it. What are you thinking of doing? Asked. I do not know yet, admitted. But I know I cannot marry Prince, not when it would prevent the galaxy from defending itself against this threat, not when it would lead to the destruction of so many innocent lives. Your father will be very angry, warned. The Dominion will consider it an insult. There could be war. There will be war anyway, replied. Either war between the empires or war against something far worse. At least if we fight each other, some of us might survive. If this threat from the outer rim continues unchallenged, everyone dies. They sat in silence for a while, both thinking about the impossible situation they faced. Finally spoke. The humans talked about cooperation, she said. About species working together as equals. What if instead of preventing your marriage, we offered an alternative? What do you mean? What if instead of joining two empires together, we created something new? A confederation based on the human model of cooperation instead of the model of domination. Princess felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. An alliance where each species kept their independence but worked together for common defense. Exactly. With the threat from the outer rim, even the major powers would benefit from that kind of cooperation, and it would protect the smaller civilizations instead of destroying them. They began to discuss the idea more seriously. What would such a confederation look like? How could they convince the major powers to consider it? What would they need to do to make it work? We would need proof that the outer rim threat is real, said. Right now, people think the humans are lying. The humans have data, replied. Sensor readings, recordings, evidence that cannot be faked. If we present it at the wedding ceremony in front of all the major leaders. It would cause chaos, warned. Good, said firmly. Sometimes chaos is better than the wrong kind of order. As they continued planning, Princess found herself thinking about something Captain had told her. The human had described how Earth's nations had finally learned to work together only when they faced extinction. They had put aside their old rivalries and combined their strengths to solve problems that no single nation could handle alone. The humans did not become strong by conquering others, said. They became strong by lifting others up, by showing that cooperation could accomplish more than competition. That is a very different philosophy from what Prince believes, observed. Yes, and that is exactly why we need to choose a different path. Princess looked up at the stars visible through the garden's transparent ceiling. Somewhere out there, an unknown threat was moving toward the galaxy, consuming everything in its path. But somewhere else out there, humans were still hopping for a better future, still believing that intelligent beings could choose cooperation over destruction. For the first time since her engagement was announced, Princess felt truly hopeful about the future. Not because everything would be easy, but because she finally understood that she had the power to choose what kind of future she wanted to help create. The wedding was tomorrow, but instead of the end of her freedom, it might become the beginning of something much larger and more important than either empire had ever imagined. She said, "Would you be willing to help me change the galaxy?" The ambassador smiled, her green scales catching the starlight. "Your Highness, I thought you would never ask." The wedding ceremony was set to take place in the station's Grand Assembly Hall. Representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy had come to witness the union between the Empire and the Dominion. The hall was filled with beings of 100 different species, all dressed in their finest ceremonial clothing. Princess stood in her private chamber, looking at herself in the mirror. The wedding dress was beautiful flowing white fabric that seemed to glow with its own inner light, covered in tiny gems that sparkled like stars. She had dreamed of wearing something like this when she was young, back when she still believed in fairy tale endings. Now she knew that sometimes the most important thing a princess could do was refuse to play her part in someone else's story. "Your Highness," said Myra, her servant, "it is time." Nodded and walked toward the door, but instead of going to the assembly hall, she turned toward the human quarters. Captain was waiting for her, along with Ambassador and a small group of other ambassadors from smaller civilizations. "Are you sure about this?" Captain asked. "Once you start, there will be no going back." "I have never been more sure of anything in my life," replied. "Do you have the data ready?" "Everything the humans collected is prepared for display," confirmed. "The sensor readings, the recordings, all the evidence of what happened in the outer rim." They walked together toward the assembly hall. As they approached the entrance, could hear the music beginning inside. The ceremony was starting. In the hall, Prince stood at the altar wearing his military dress uniform. The gray fabric was covered with medals and symbols of conquest. His black eyes scanned the crowd like a predator looking for weakness. When he saw that Princess was late, his expression darkened with anger. Emperor's father sat in the front row looking impatient. Behind him were the leaders of dozens of civilizations, the Council of Four, the Trade Federation, the Academic Union, and many others. All of them were expecting to witness the creation of the galaxy's most powerful alliance. The music reached its crescendo, and Princess entered the hall. But instead of walking alone toward the altar, she was followed by Captain, Ambassador, and representatives from 20 smaller civilizations. A murmur of confusion ran through the crowd. This was not how royal weddings were supposed to work. Princess walked to the center of the hall, but she did not continue toward Prince. Instead, she stopped and faced the assembled crowd. "My fellow beings," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "I have called you here today not for a wedding but for something far more important. I have called you here to save the galaxy." The murmur of confusion became a roar of shocked voices. Prince stepped forward, his face twisted with rage. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. "Princess, you will take your place at the altar immediately." "No," said calmly, "I will not." The simple word fell into the hall like a stone into still water, creating ripples of shock that spread through the entire gathering. Royal princesses did not say no to imperial princes. They did not defy centuries of tradition and diplomatic protocol. "I will not marry Prince," continued, "because such a marriage would doom us all to destruction." She gestured to Captain, who activated a holographic display in the center of the hall. The three-dimensional image showed the galaxy with its billions of stars. Then it began to show what the humans had witnessed in the outer rim. Star systems vanishing, entire civilizations disappearing without a trace, the threat moving steadily inward toward the heart of the galaxy. "This is what approaches us," said as the crowd fell silent, staring at the terrible display. "Something that destroys worlds, not by conquering them, but by erasing them completely. The human delegation brought us this warning at great risk to themselves." Prince snarled and pointed at Captain. "Lies, human tricks and deceptions." "The sensor data is real," Captain said, stepping forward. "We have independent verification from 3 different detection systems. This threat is genuine, and it will reach the major civilizations within 5 standard years." Emperor stood up, his face dark with anger. "Daughter, you will cease this disruption immediately. We are not here to listen to primitive species spreading panic with false stories." "Father," said, her voice full of sadness but also strength, "when have you ever known me to lie? Use your empathic abilities. Read my mind if you must. You will see that I believe completely in what I am saying." The Emperor paused. As in, he could sense emotions and truth as clearly as his daughter could. After a moment, his expression changed from anger to confusion. You truly believe this threat is real," he said slowly. "I do. And more than that, I believe that the marriage you have arranged will make it impossible for us to defend against it." Turn to face the entire assembly. "If the Empire and the Dominion merge, we will become focused on expanding our power and controlling other species. We will see every other civilization as either a subject to be ruled or an enemy to be destroyed. When this threat arrives, we will face it alone, and we will fall alone." The crowd erupted in arguments. Some beings shouted that she was right, others that she was betraying her duty. Prince's voice rose above the chaos. "Enough of this madness. Princess, you will marry me as arranged, or there will be war between our empires." "There will be war anyway," replied. "Either war between us over territory and power, or war against something that threatens all life in the galaxy. I would rather fight beside you than against you, but I will not let fear of conflict prevent me from choosing what I believe is right." She walked to the display showing the galactic map, and pointed to the areas where civilizations had already vanished. "The beings who lived in these systems are gone forever," she said. "But their death is not meaningless if we learn from it. They have shown us that no single empire, no matter how powerful, can face this threat alone." Ambassador stepped forward. "Princess speaks wisdom. My people have opposed this marriage because we feared what it would mean for smaller civilizations. But now I see that it would doom the larger ones as well." "What are you proposing?" asked Chancellor Vex of the Academic Union. "I propose something that has never been tried before in galactic history," said. "Not an empire built on conquest, but a confederation built on cooperation. Each species keeps its independence, but we share technology, resources, and knowledge. We face threats together as equals instead of alone as rivals." "Preposterous," Prince shouted. "The strong rule and the weak serve. That is the natural order." "That is not what the humans believe," said, looking at Captain. "Captain, would you tell us how Earth's nations learn to work together?" Captain stepped into the center of the hall. Despite being surrounded by beings much larger and more powerful than herself, she looked calm and confident. "When our world was dying," she said, Our nations spent their time fighting each other for resources instead of working together to solve the problems that threatened everyone. Only when we faced complete extinction did we learn to set aside our differences. She gestured to the display showing the threat from the outer rim. You are facing that same choice now. You can fight each other while this unknown enemy grows stronger, or you can combine your strengths to defend all life in the galaxy. And if we refuse, Prince asked mockingly. Then you will fall, Captain said simply. One by one, system by system, just like the civilizations in the outer rim. And in the end, there will be no one left to remember that any of us ever existed. The hall fell silent again. The terrible possibility hung in the air like a dark cloud. Finally, Emperor spoke. Daughter, what you propose is unprecedented. How would such a confederation work? We would start small, said. Those civilizations willing to share intelligence about this threat, those willing to coordinate their defenses, those willing to treat other species as partners instead of subjects. The Republic would join such a confederation, Ambassador said immediately. As would the Academic Union, added Chancellor Vex. If this threat is real, then sharing knowledge is our best hope for understanding it. One by one, ambassadors from smaller civilizations stood up to pledge their support. Not all of them, but enough to show that the idea was gaining momentum. Prince looked around the hall in disbelief. His perfect marriage alliance was crumbling before his eyes, replaced by something he could not understand or control. This is madness, he said. You are choosing weakness over strength. No, Princess said, meeting his gaze without fear. I am choosing cooperation over domination, hope over fear, the future over the past. She turned to face the entire assembly one last time. I know this is difficult to accept. I know it goes against everything we have been taught about power and survival, but the humans have shown me something important. True strength does not come from the ability to force others to submit. True strength comes from the courage to stand together when everything seems impossible. The princess removed her wedding veil and let it fall to the floor. I will not marry Prince. I will not help create an empire built on conquest and fear. Instead, I offer myself as the first member of a new kind of alliance, one where every species has a voice, where every civilization is valued, where we face the future together instead of alone. The hall erupted in chaos again, but this time it was different. There were still angry voices, but there were also excited ones. Beings who had never spoken to each other before were suddenly discussing possibilities they had never imagined. Captain walked over to stand beside Princess. Your Highness, she said quietly, what you did today took enormous courage. I learned it from humans, replied with a small smile. You taught me that sometimes the most important choice is the one that seems impossible. As the chaos continued around them, Ambassador joined them. This is only the beginning, she said. Building this confederation will be harder than anything we have ever attempted. Yes, Princess agreed, looking out at the crowd of arguing, excited, hopeful beings. But for the first time since I learned about the threat from the outer rim, I believe we might actually succeed. Prince stormed out of the hall, followed by the delegation. Some other ambassadors left as well, unwilling to consider such radical changes. But many remained, and they were talking, planning, hopping. Princess had refused to play her part in someone else's story. Instead, she had chosen to begin writing a new story, entirely one, where the galaxy's greatest strength would come not from its most powerful empires, but from all its species choosing to stand together against the darkness approaching from the void between the stars. The humans had given the galaxy something more valuable than technology or weapons. They had given it hope and the courage to choose a better future even when that choice seemed impossible. And that, Princess realized, might just be enough to save them all.